Minister Patel. We will now call upon the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition to come and speak to us. Minister Patel.
Thank you very much, colleague. Today, as we all know, has been day one of an unprecedented event in South Africa, the start of the first ever lockdown. There are four key things that we've seen today. The first is the seriousness of the challenge, with a significant rise in the infection rate, with more than 1,000 people now positive, and our first death. The second is we've seen enormously high levels of cooperation by tens of millions of South Africans who have followed the call by the President to stay at home. We have seen major cities that have been empty. We've seen office blocks that have been deserted, and we'd like to thank fellow South Africans for that. The third thing is that we've seen evidence of the state putting mechanisms in place across the country, the police, the army, but also critical public essential services that have been mobilized at very, very short notice. Finally, we've seen some challenges and glitches, as one would expect from this major and massive mobilization of resources across the nation, and we'll be addressing these as we refine our approach and as we implement the lockdown over the remaining period. On the economy as a whole, most of the economy shut down today, with the exception of essential services. And while we had reports of some companies which stayed open, were not essential services, these were relatively small exceptions. Most companies in those sectors of the economy that are not essential services obeyed the call of the President. Workers, employers stood together in enabling people to stay at home. Food production kept going over this period. The production line was working today. We had workers in farms, in food factories, in the trucks that bring the food from the factory to the shops, and retailers were generally open and were beginning to restock many of the shelves after the big rush to the shops that had taken place yesterday. For retail stores as a whole, we've seen a large number of shoppers both yesterday and today in many parts of the country. Today was the first day that many monthly paid workers were able to go and shop after they were paid on the 25th of the month. I spoke with retailers this afternoon to see what the experience was and to identify ways in which we can manage the process with as little movement of people across cities and in suburbs. We must shorten the queues outside the retail stores. We must decrease the number of people in stores to prevent the spread of the virus. So we're having a conversation now with the retail sector, with the police, and in the command center to see what are sensible ways in which we can enable people to get the basic foods and the basic goods that they need, but also avoid large congregations that can spread the virus. Retailers are restocking their shelves in the next 2 days to ensure that those who need to shop next week have basic and essential goods available. And I'd like to thank the workers in the factories, the truck drivers that are bringing food to the retail stores so that South Africans know that they have access to food. Over the next 3 weeks, grocery stores and spaza shops will be the one place where South Africans need to go for basic and essential goods. And so we're going to call on our people to have patience as we introduce the necessary measures to ensure social distance is maintained, is enhanced, that we can all the time, everything we do is to use the 3 weeks period to limit the spread of the virus. On additional regulations, last night, new regulations were approved which specified essential goods and services. We've updated the basic goods list. It's now in the Government Gazette. For example, Minister Dlamini Zuma has gazetted that products of care for babies and toddlers are now clearly in the list of essential goods, as are personal toiletries like face wash, roll-ons, toothpaste, and so on. The essential services list has also been updated to include tow trucks and vehicle recovery services, those call centers that are necessary to provide health, safety, social support, government and financial services, the harvesting and storage activities that are essential to prevent spoilage and wastage of primary agricultural goods, the small number of people who have to work in the payroll departments of a company to ensure that workers get their wages, those who are paid on a weekly basis and those who are paid before the end of the lockdown period. And it's only that small number of people who run the payroll that will be an essential service. And critical maintenance services, which can't be delayed for more than 21 days, where you have these large establishments that have to ensure an orderly shutdown, those core maintenance services will be permitted. We've also provided clarification in a number of areas, including the National Institute of Communicable Diseases, medical scheme administration, and vital demand services for the energy grid. But we're keeping the areas as focused, as narrow as possible, so that most South Africans can stay at home in responding to the appeal of the President. We now have 5 broad product areas which cover the basic goods which our people will need in this period, and they are set out in 33 essential service areas. We will make this clearly available to the public through government communication platforms and through the media. We'd like to thank businesses and consumers for working with us during this time. It is a disruption to our life. We're not going to be able to fight the virus if we can continue with all the things that we do every day. So it's disruption, but it's disruption to try to disrupt the spread of the virus, to ensure that, in fact, South Africans remain safe. We introduced from yesterday a facility through the CIPC website that companies can register to indicate that there are essential services, so that we create a national list of essential services. By 5 o'clock this afternoon, 50,000 companies have registered their businesses as providers of essential services and goods through the lockdown period. They employ 1.5 million workers who are working to make sure that the nation has food, cleaning materials, medical products, other necessities, and transport. We'll update these from time to time. I'd like to thank the Companies and Intellectual Properties Commission for doing a great job. They have, at very short notice, put together this website, and they're refining it, strengthening it, and sorting out the kinks in the system. Certificates have been issued to 40,000 businesses. The rest will be emailed shortly. And I want to indicate that healthcare professionals who are registered with the Health Professional Council do not need to register through this website. Neither do sole proprietors, small businesses like your spaza shops and so on. But we are beginning to develop a single database of the key companies that would need to be kept open to ensure that our people have what is needed. On the medical supply chain, Minister Mkhize, who is not with us today, has done great work over the last few days in putting the Department of Health and the public sector together. We're creating a common database where we can see the stocks of key medical supplies that will be needed over this period, and to ensure that where there are critical areas, that we ramp up production. On export controls, we have to ensure that there are adequate a supply of key pharmaceutical and medical supplies so that we can prevent and treat those who are ill during this next period. To ensure that we are able to meet the demands of our people, I have today signed off on a set of regulations which will control the export of key goods, including things like face masks, hand sanitizer, and critical medications. It's not an export ban, but we will be controlling the level of exports to ensure that we have a sufficient supply within our borders, and companies wishing to export these items must submit applications to the International Trade Administration Commission, who will then consult with the relevant government departments before issuing permits for export. We've also worked with the Department of Tourism and the Department of Health to enable hotels to make their facilities available for quarantine sites, and we've signed off on a set of exemptions to the Competition Act to enable coordination between hotels and government departments, both on quantities of beds that will be made available and pricing of these beds. Finally, on excessive pricing, we have seen examples of people seeking to exploit the high demand for certain goods by hiking their prices. The Competition Commission and the Consumer Commission have received just over 500 complaints of excessive pricing or unjustified price increases. These are now being acted on, and the full might of the law will be used against companies concerned. We will not hesitate to charge people criminally under the legislation, and they will be put in jail if they are found guilty. Companies will be given fines that may put many of those businesses in closure. They will basically have to close their business because it is necessary for us to protect South Africans from not being exploited in this period. So we make a call on every supplier of goods in this period: don't hike up your prices, don't charge excessive prices. We're in this crisis together, and we have to manage this crisis till we get to the other end. And so it cannot be business as usual, and it certainly can't be a situation where some will seek to score advantage at the expense of our people. So the overall story is that our key supply chains are working, and that we have had tremendous support from our people as workers, as consumers, as truck drivers, as business people, and we'd like to appreciate that. We recognize some of the challenges, we're working on these, and many of these will be resolved in the next few days. Thank you.